Everybody, I'm Ryan from Ryan and Bethany Board Game Reviews. I am here with Pat Marino. Say hi, Pat.
Hi, everybody.
This is the designer of Gem Hens, Mountains Out of Molehills, and a bunch of other stuff that we're going to talk about. We were at Geekway to the West. This is a convention that's in St. Louis, Missouri. We were able to meet up, talk about some things, and I want to give you guys a chance to hear about some things we talked about. I've been having a lot of fun here. So yeah, let's get into it. The first time we were introduced to one of your works was Gem Hens.
Yeah.
This is a game that's just tons of cool gems, little bits, very, very eye-catching. The cover itself is very evocative of the theming of it. So how did you come about this game? How did you come up with the theming of this?
Yeah, so that game started well before I worked at the Op. I got into game design, and I'd done a little bit on my own, and my brother's also a gamer, and so we would chat a lot about game ideas. And we had this joking conversation about like Fabergé eggs, like the famous jeweled eggs, and where do they come from, and it got wildly inappropriate, but basically landed with like, well, clearly like there's some deranged farmer who's throwing precious gems to his chickens in their feed, and then they're laying these jeweled eggs as a result. And we're like, this is a game, isn't it? We're making this game now. And so we started developing it with the sort of dice grid where you're throwing the feed out there, and then the chickens are trying to like, you know, originally the idea was they had to lay the most valuable egg because whoever laid the least valuable egg was going to be Sunday dinner. So that was the motivation as a chicken.
I want to make my best egg. Please don't eat me.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a lot of fun with that theme and joking around with it and coming up with the components and things. And originally we were calling it like Fabergé eggs, and then we landed on Gem Hens when we signed it with Gray Fox. So that was actually the first game I ever had published, and it was really cool to do it with my brother. And it came out actually after I started at the Op, so that contract was signed and Gray Fox was working on it. Then I got a job in the industry, so there was that awkward moment of like, hey, there's my first published game from a competitor.
Yeah, like, I think that's one of the nice things about our hobby is, in general, I think most hobbyists want the hobby to do well, right?
Yes.
We want our individual slice of it to do well, perform well, all those things. But I think what I see is your reviewers talking to other reviewers, not competing about numbers and those things, but hey, how's it going? What games are you playing? And I see the same thing from designers and from publishers. Would you agree with that state of the industry? People are generally just pro board games. Yeah,
it's a very friendly industry, and especially as the community of consumers is growing, right? Like, not that many years ago, it's like, oh, I play board games. We were like, oh yeah, I played Monopoly. And you're like, oh no, there's all these things. And then it became like, oh, I play board games. And people are like, oh, Catan. And now it's like, oh, I just saw Wingspan. And you're like, oh, wow, it's like really becoming mainstream. And I think there's so much still potential for growth, right? There's so many untapped consumers, and there's so many people that we can sell games to that haven't experienced them yet, or they've experienced some games but not the rest, that we don't need to like fight with other publishers. Like it's sort of the rising tide lifts all boats philosophy of like, let's grow the industry together, let's collaborate, let's figure out ways to do things. And of course, we at the Op love that, right? Like we have all of our co-brand partners. Like we work with Steve Jackson Games to do the licensed Munchkins. We worked with Czech Games to do licensed code names. We just did Marvel Dice Throne with the Dice Throne team, and they're fantastic. And we've got some more things in the works with them. And we're always looking like, who can we sort of bring into our family of partners and collaborators and kind of support that. And then when it comes to the sort of content creators, our philosophy is like, what does it hurt to send a game, right? Like we don't know who's going to be the next great, contributor, content creator, and we want to support as many people as we can, because the more people they reach, the more consumers, the more fans, and the more friends we have, right? So
yeah, I heard an Eric Lang quote that was really caught me. I think he was kind of being cornered into like saying who's your competitor as far as publishers and designers and those kinds of things. And the way he answered, I thought was brilliant. Was if someone's playing a game on their table with the friends and families around them, tabletop games have won. I have won. We have won. My competitors are video games. My competitors are not reading, but you know what I mean, those kinds of things that take you away from those social settings that are on the table that we have so much fun doing our hobby here. So I thought that was a brilliant answer to both say, not give an answer, but also give a real answer as far as the cooperation you talked about.
Well, I was having a conversation with my brother recently, because we see posts all the time like in designer communities of like, if you could design a game with anybody, who would it be, right? And it's like, it's hard to answer because there's so many great people in the industry that it's like, not only do I love their work, but I like them as a person, and I could see that collaboration going really well. Like, Matt Leacock's one that's on my list because he's just such a great guy and the interactions I have. And I think back to when I first designed a game, I somehow found his email and was like, hey, I don't know what to do. I want to get into game design. And he actually wrote back and like gave some advice and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking like, this guy's got Pandemic out. He's a big deal and like very approachable. But then my brother countered. He's like, okay, but who's your rival, right? Like as if like there needs to be a supervillain counterpart to me as a designer. And I was like, I can't even answer that question. Like, there's nobody that I see myself as at odds with. It's like either I look at them and I'm like in awe, right? Like Reiner Knizia, it's like 650
maybe
plus published games.
Envy their success, maybe perhaps, but not like who they are or what they're,
And like that whole like rival thing, it's almost like you have to have somebody who's like on your level, but that you're at odds with. And I'm like, anybody who I see is sort of at my level, which I tend to think of as, we have all these great names, and it's like, I've got some stuff out there, but still kind of up and coming and trying to get out there more. And like anybody who's in that boat, I'm like, we're all in this together. Like, let's get more games out there and share ideas and play test and do all that kind of stuff. So it's very much a community and not at all a like business mindset, which
right.
is cool.
Obviously, we still want to do well, be profitable for our company, our shareholders, all those things. But this company or this hobby has just been so welcoming. We're happy to be a part of it. For another one, title that maybe our viewers are more recently been introduced to of yours is Mountains Out of Molehills.
Yeah.
This is a game that we reviewed and had a blast playing. It has great table presence. I think it's been kind of a key signature of the things that you put your fingerprints on as a designer and developer, and those things, they all have great table presences. So again, how did that kind of come about from discussions and themings?
Yeah, so that actually was another one I designed with my brother around the same time as Gem Hens. Before I was at the op, and we were actually trying to find in our Slack channel archives like what that first conversation was the other day, because we were like, how did that come? And I remember he had some kind of a concept that involved like chip tiles and you were pushing up stacks, and that evolved into the Molehills theme. And then, we're like, well, if you make it 3D and we use some stacking pieces, and we found those Unifix cubes at a teacher store, and we were using those as a prototype, and it just felt right. Like this is what the components need to be. And signed it to a publisher. They ended up like letting the contract expire and got the rights back. But in that time frame, I had moved to the op and had a full-time position there. And so I brought it into the office one day to prototype, and I was like, hey, I have the rights back to this thing. It's already been tested. Like you feel good about it. And people were like, wow, this is really approachable, we really like it. And the concern was like the production, right? Like you've got all these stacking pieces, they have to fit snugly together so you can lift a stack up and they stay together, but also come apart easy enough that you can manipulate them, and they can't wear out over time, and the 2-layer board. And I can tell you, like, our VP of production, like, we joke about it, but I'm always asking for more stuff, like, and a lot of times it's like just being obnoxious to be funny, but it's sort of like well, can I get like all metal coins in this one? And like, I need custom meeples with screen printing, and like really trying to push that envelope, because it does make a difference, right? Like the tactile experience of playing the game and what it looks like on the table and how it feels. When you look around an event like Geekway, you want to be the one behind, like as a publisher or a designer or whatever, the game where people stop and look.
Right.
And whether that's like Hues and Cues, right, from Scott, where it's like, people immediately see that color grid on the table and they're like, what is that?
What's going on with that?
Yeah.
I've never seen a board like that.
Yeah. Or, it's 3D presence, or it's people who can't stop playing with the components because they're just so fun to manipulate. And, whether you're stacking up your extra houses in Catan or you're playing with the pieces in Mountains Out of Molehills, that element of it and the high quality production is really important. And especially for the op, as we move more into the hobby space. Like, we had Hogwarts Battle, and we've had the Rising series, and we've had a lot of games in that space. And now we're starting to do a little bit more of the hobby games without an IP on them. So Mountains Out of Molehills is in that space. With that, we recognize like components and art are critical to stand out in the market today, because there's just so many new games, and it's so easy when you're at the game store to go, oh yeah, ignore those, oh this, and gravitate towards something. So we really try to emphasize, like, we want that experience where the box art excites you about playing it. You're excited to teach it to other people because you have just a good feeling playing it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier. You have some involvement with the called the Rising series, right? So like the Dark Side Rising with Star Wars theming, or the Death Eaters Rising with the Harry Potter theming, and all those kinds of different ones. And they all feature usually this massive, it's not a miniature, it's like a bigature, right? This huge thing that's just a focal point of the whole game. And it's just is enormous and eye-catching. So I was going to talk to you a little bit more about that. Like, what role do you think? Do you see the hobby going more in that direction? More big eye-catching things, less chits, less kind of flat boards, and more things are three-dimensional in one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we saw Holly from Floodgate. Inside Up Games recently had a 2-level board right around the same time Mountains on a Molehills came out. They had their game on Kickstarter. You know, you've got outrageous production quality coming out of a lot of Kickstarter games. Like Elf Creek is really known for that now. Chip Theory with their chip pieces and that kind of a thing. I think there's a higher expectation from fans. I think one of the challenges we face in the industry side is cost of shipping, cost of production, all those things are going up, and the margins are getting thinner and thinner. And so you kind of get into this point of like, well, do we raise prices? And we see the whole industry shift towards more, you know, like keeping the premium products at a higher price, or do we find ways to create a really good experience that you can play without premium components? And when are they necessary and when are they gimmicks, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the balance. And with the Rising series, it's funny, when Andrew Wolf was designing the first one, I remember we had one of those the Q figs, you know, and it was Hulk, because it's just the one that was in the office. So the whole time we're fighting Thanos, it was actually like a Hulk figure in the middle of the thing.
It's about the right size of person, yeah.
Yeah, and so when we got time to do the costing, we were like, well, we could easily put a chip piece there, and it could be flat, and the game would have worked. You know, you're just spinning a spinner dial and pointing to the different regions. But we'd become so accustomed to the experience of having, like, the villain is on the front of the box, the villain's in the center of the board. It's like that presence there that kind of adds to this is what you're fighting against. And so we were like, you know what, let's go ahead and just put the figure in there. And we're very blessed at the app. We have a 3D design team in-house and big fancy 3D printers, and that team is just unbelievable with the stuff that they do. So, you know, we go to Darren and his team and we're like, okay, we need Darth Vader, and he comes back with all these concept sketches, and then they're doing different versions. And you know, at one point we had one where it was like the scene from Rebels where he's on the X-Wing. Oh, he's like,
actually standing on it.
Yeah.
On the TIE Fighter or whatever it was.
Oh, I guess it was a TIE Fighter, wasn't it? Yeah.
He's like coming down from.
Yeah, it's like that big
riding this TIE Fighter.
Right. And so like Darren had like kind of started to model that, and we were like, but you know, the figure's like this big, and so Darth was like this big. And we're like, it's not center enough. So then we went to like the bust approach where he was like big and had the lightsaber. But that's certainly a fun part of that. Or like with Plankton Rising, it was like, well, Plankton's only this big, so how do we make him a center figure so we have the chum bucket and he's just the little guy on top, you know?
They're playing upon that same thing,
yeah,
for comedy's sake. I like that. So I've been kind of dabbling a little bit in design things, and I felt that my design inspirations have come from some very weird places. So what have been some of the weirdest places that you've seen a situation and came up with a design based off of it?
Ooh, that's a good question. For a period of time, I used to carry these little notebooks with me, and my goal was to write like one new design idea a day, right? Like whether that was, oh, mechanically I could do this, or you know, thematically, like I'd encounter something and be like, that'd be a really interesting story to tell in a game or an experience to have. And I look back through those notes sometimes because some of them are like, what was I thinking, right? But it was like, well, I wrote something for that day, and that was a thing. But one of the ones I never really did anything with, but that stands out to me as like, oh, I should go back to that, was I happened to see a slide, like an old-fashioned slide rule.
Okay.
And was looking at like the design of it where it's sort of these metal brackets and then the wooden pieces that slide through it, and trying to figure out a way to basically do that with chipboard, right, where you would have a like sort of a track down the middle, and you'd be able to insert these different pieces into it that would slide through. So you'd have like a vertical track of what was revealed, and then these pieces that would slide through. And it was almost like an action sequence programming thing where like, okay, each one of those had maybe 3 actions on it, and as you slid them and lined them up, that would be the sequence of actions you'd have to take for that turn.
Okay.
So where you slotted those things into your board and how far you slid them, like that would be your start of the turn, and then everybody would go down their track and resolve. It's like, well, I need this resource before I need that. Kind of like how Furnace, if you played Furnace.
Yeah. And resolve left to right.
Yeah, and
where
trying
you
to
place
figure
those
out,
things.
I need this resource before I can activate that and convert it to that. But it was just, I saw that note the other day. I was like, oh yeah, the slide roll thing, and then I just never went back to it. But yeah.
Well, now that it's in your head again, you'll do it again.
Yeah.
Go back to it. So we're obviously at Geekway. This is my second time here. Is this your first time at Geekway?
Yeah, first time at Geekway.
What are your overall thoughts?
I'm having a really good time. You know, a lot of the shows I get to do are the bigger consumer shows or the industry shows, sales shows, and those have a very different vibe. Sales shows, of course, we're meeting with retailers, we're getting them excited about our new product for the year, making sure they're educated on that product so they can sell it and be successful with it in their shops. The consumer shows, we're in the booth demoing just nonstop, right? Because we want as many people to get hands on the game as possible. And then this show is about playing games, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of pitching going on and some prototypes, and there's a small vendor area, but for the most part, it's socializing and playing games. It's like this is sort of where, of course, we all start in the hobby, is that piece of it. And it's nice to be at a show surrounded by some industry folks and interacting, but like breaking out a new game and learning it. Or you know, yesterday I was looking at Origin's First Builder, so I took it out of the library, set it up, and I was reading the rule book, and somebody I never met just walked by and went, "Oh, I know how to play that one. You want to play?" And I was like, "Oh," fold up the rule book, put that away. He sat down, his buddy came over, they taught the game, we played it, had a great time. So it's that kind of community that's like, it's nice to get back to that, just like enjoying the hobby in a convention setting as opposed to, you know, which is also very fun. Demoing a game, especially when you worked on it, is like super fun because you get to see the reactions, but it's very busy, and this is a nice slower pace, so I'm enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird thing to make your hobby turn into a career. It's like, do you lose sight of what got you there in the first place? You still enjoy it, but this is settings where you get to get back to those roots and just enjoy playing games.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so one last question. Is there anything we can expect from you or the op in the future that you'll be having your fingerprints on in some way? What spoilers can you give us without giving away too much?
Ooh, that's tough because
I know some licensing makes it a little more challenging, but just what can you give us?
Yeah, so coming out later this year, from the op in general, we have our Disney Sorcerer's Arena game, which is basically shipping now. So if you're hunting around your local game store, it might be showing up on shelf this week. Official release is early June, but a few copies are trickling out early. And so Fletch designed that one. That one's a great game, and we'll have expansions for that rolling periodically with new characters. For me personally, Fire Nation Rising, which is the next sort of contribution to that series and set in the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe, which is one of my all-time favorite IPs. When we signed that one, I was like, I don't even need to rewatch these. I'm going to, but I don't need to because I know every minute of every episode. So that one was a lot of fun to work on. And then I got some stuff coming for 23 that I can't talk about, but we're doing some custom art for a new cooperative hobby game I've been developing for the last year and a half or so. That'll be out next year. And we're already starting to, believe it or not, look at inventor pitches and game concepts for 2024.
You guys are way forward thinking. You are ahead of the...
Yeah. A lot of the 23 stuff is already over into art and design at this point. So we're starting to finish up development for 23 on some projects that are a little heavier, and then look at 24. So I've just got this wave of really interesting inventor submissions. And there's a part of me that's like, I want to be designing all the time, but in my position I also get to like find those gems, and there's a joy in being like, I get to bring this to people, you know, and sign that and make that happen for somebody else. So that's as a piece you talked about, like making your hobby your job. It's like doing that takes time away from me doing my own design, but it also means I get to do some really cool stuff with some really cool people. Yeah, and I do have a couple projects I wish I could talk about because I think you'll like them, but that'll come later this year probably.
Well, awesome. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for talking with us, showing some kind of the behind the scenes of all those games. Yeah, so lots of fun stuff coming out from Pat as well as the op. Keep an eye on all that stuff, and we'll be sure to cover that on our channel as we are finding out about it as well. So, you guys, we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. You guys, thanks so much for watching. I had a fantastic time chatting with Pat about all kinds of gaming topics. Obviously, there's some challenges about recording at a convention, such as lights, sounds, those kinds of things. But still, I hope you had a great time watching it, just like I had a great time talking with Pat. You can find him on social media at Dr. Pat Makes Games, and all the things the op has going on. You can learn more about the op at the Op Games. And for us, you can find us on all of our normal social media challenges. We got all kinds of fun stuff coming out on a regular basis, so be sure to follow us there, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.